Good evening. Welcome to season 2, episode 3 or 4 of the Lynn Show. I'm Rabbi Lynn, and I'm coming to you live from New York City. Normally, there's New York City in the background. It's a green screen. Now I'm actually exposed brick in New York City, and happy to be here. And thank you for joining. We have a great show tonight. I think we always have a great show, and we're here trying to bring you ideas that are relevant and inspiring and informative, and get you to learn about them from people in our community of more Manhattan here at the JEC, and hope that we can walk away from this, knowing more than we did before and feeling that we made good use of the half hour and take something home with us. So tonight is going to be kind of the best take home treat you can have, because tonight's topic is wine. So I can't reach through the screen and give you a bottle of wine, but hopefully we'll give you some information and ideas and science and Torah and Judaism and depth and, all these great new insights into this wonderful world of wine, which obviously is key to Jewish life. I mean, like, you're drinking wine at every major stage, okay, and of life, the most important things you have. And we got to talk about why and what we're doing with it and why it's so key to our existence as Jews, okay? And hopefully all of these things will meld in the conversation to follow. We have two great guests tonight. Danielle Burston, who is she works at Flatiron Wines here in New York, a graduate of Cornell and the Culinary Institute of America, and she is our residential wine expert. And we will have tonight also Mayor Herzog from the famed Herzog family. Okay, that's a name that drips with wine, and Mayor will be joining us as well on the show. Just a few things. Last week, you should tune in. Last week's show, we spoke about sleep, and learned a lot about sleep. You spend a third of your life sleeping, so to learn something about what you do for a third of your life, I think was pretty great. Okay, the one thing with all the techniques that Jen taught us last week about how to sleep and how to make the most of a third of your life. One thing she didn't discuss was, of course, like wine, which can get you to sleep. Okay. And I do want to find the stats when this coronavirus thing is over, God willing, very soon, the rise in alcohol consumption, or we can actually ask Danielle, let's see the rise in alcohol, at least purchase. Okay. Consumer alcoholism, as opposed to just like, clinical alcoholism. I'm sure it's gone through the roof. And I'm sure we're relying heavily on it, but that's not how we as Jews want to be relating to it as a medicinal, numbing impact to the trauma of life. Okay, we want to try and see the deeper sides to it. So I'm going to do something right now because it's about wine. I'm going to do something which is like, it should be horrible to any wine expert, and I do like wine a lot, and even for me, I can't believe I'm doing this, but like, they have this can, like wine in a can, Bartenura, which apparently my staff has told me is like all the rage. They're big personalities that are promoting this. It's a huge thing. Kosher wine from Bartenura, right? Listen, the worst thing you could do for wine, at the end of the show, open a can, okay? Open a can of wine. But the best thing you could do, of course, is say a blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagofen. Say a blessing on the wine. That's really what's going to make it work, okay? A can of Bartenura. By the end of the night, hopefully, we really won't be doing this much more often. Okay, good. A little bit of some of the ideas behind wine before we get to our guests. Wine is, like I said, at every stage of life in Judaism, and it's extremely, extremely powerful and extremely deep. And what's it doing at every stage? Okay, so our guests will bring out, of course, the beauty of wine. But just for a moment, give you just an idea. We always engage wine when we are transitioning or somehow converging the physical world and the spiritual world. I want you to have this in mind, okay? Whenever we are going through a major life stage, whenever there's something happening like a marriage or, a wedding feast, right? These events on Kiddush on Friday night, on the holidays, wine is always there when bris milah, right? Wine is always there when we are engaging from the physical realm into the spiritual realm. When we make that transition, wine is like the magic carpet ride that takes us there. Not because, yes, we do physiologically get more open and available, and we calm our nerves, etc. There's a science and physiology to it as well. But even in the philosophy behind wine, that we move from this physical world to the spiritual world. A great teacher, the Vilna Gaon, as he's called, said very clearly, like wine defies the laws of physicality, right? The laws of physics. It gets better with age. It's a spiritual essence. Like the soul gets better with age, wine gets better with age. A beautiful teaching about wine, there's a saying by the sages, because nichnas yain yotze sod. The wine goes in, and the sod, this word sod in Hebrew, which will be mistranslated as secrets, come out. Why is it a mistranslation? The wine goes in and the secrets come out. It's only a mistranslation because of English. Because when I say the word secret, you think of like someone whispering something in someone's ear that no one else can hear. So that's not what it means. It doesn't mean a secret is not something that I know and you don't yet know because I haven't, spilled the beans, right? The word secret, sod in Hebrew, means something which cannot be spoken, something which is beyond the physical constraints of words, right? Try to describe someone what riding a bike is like. Someone doesn't know how to ride a bike, and you just describe the whole experience. When they actually learn how to ride a bike, your words will be completely empty. They will not have done justice, right? So you look at the back of the bottle of a great bottle of wine, it describes the tastes and these things, right? When you drink it, it's different. The experience of something is far different. The secret means, the sod means there are deep spiritual realities to you, to the world around you. And wine brings these things out. The wine goes in, and then we can access the world of the sod, the world of the secret. Okay, so it literally, wine just follows us through life. And we're not afraid of giving it to kids because you're supposed to be balanced in life. The spiritual, physical relationship has to be balanced. If you have too much, you're a drunken idiot. If you don't have enough, you're not understanding and appreciating what's going on. We teach our kids, you give your kids a little wine at the Shabbos table, whatever it is. You have to be in control of your spiritual, physical realms, but you have to use them right and you have to reach high. And wine is the way we get there. Okay, so let's jump in now and let's meet our first guest, Danielle Burston. As I said, hi, Danielle. How you doing?
Rabbi. Good.
Great. As I said before, Daniela is just recently graduated from the CIA.
No, Cornell, most recently.
Oh, most recently, Cornell. Well, the CIA, just felt that was good because, CIA, great. So the Culinary Institute of America, which is different than what you thought the CIA was, is a part of your educational career here, and then at Cornell most recently in the hospitality.
Yeah, the hotel school.
Famed hospitality hotel administration at Cornell. Amazing. Great to have you here, Daniela. And you are presently working in Flatiron Wines and Spirit, and wine is your love of life, as it turns out. Tell us, how did you get into it? I mean, there you are, trying to, I guess, be a chef.
Yeah.
And you just got waylaid into specializing over here in the world of wine. How'd you get into it?
So
Bartspura.
I am not drinking tonight, but I got into the world of wine kind of as a happy accident, in which when I went to Cornell, it was my way of being in the food world. And I got into some blind tasting club that made me fall in love more with wine. And when I moved to New York, I didn't want to find a job in January. So I took a wine course under a bunch of master sommeliers who were my teachers. And then coronavirus hit. So we are here now. And I came back to New York and started working at my local wine shop and fell in love with it there. Even more.
Great. And we can find you there, right? Flatiron.
Yeah, I'm there Saturday to Wednesday every week.
Okay, so you're fresh out of school, you're fresh into the business. It's a passion of yours. That passion I want to be infectious over here. Tell me, what is it that you love most about wine? First of all, what caught your attention about it? You did you just took a wine course and okay, I'm not going to devote my 20s to this thing. And probably much further on. What grabbed you first about wine, and then what do you think is just what is just the most inspiring thing about wine itself to you?
So I love the history of wine and kind of the roots it has. As in Judaism, it has obviously a lot of ceremonial purposes, when you learn about wines in different regions and the reason that wine is so coveted in a lot of those regions, it dates back to monks and Christianity. So the history of those places are very old. I was learning about a winery in northern Italy that dates back to the 1100s. Not a little. That's
More.
I think Bartino is in Piedmont. This is in a
Can I just ask you, is this really like a whole fashion thing now, bartender? Like it's a big
not necessarily very canned wines. I think they serve a purpose. There are people making them really well, and there's people that are not making them really well. But there's some master sommeliers out in California making some that are pretty delicious. And then there's in New Zealand, I think they're trying to dry hop them. So like beer, like think of an IPA.
right.
Trying to do that with wine, which I don't know. I don't know how much I like that, but to each their own.
Okay, my when the can of wine came up, like, whoa, I'm old and I'm way out of this. Like I can't look at canning wine. Okay, I like to can the cans of wine. Let me ask you this: like, so how you're young in your career, and there are a lot of people out there who really will. Wine's a thing where you naturally enjoy if you have a good bottle of wine. Like someone goes, like, if you're not a wine aficionado, you go out and there's a nice bottle of wine. You're like, that's really great. And first of all, New Yorkers for sure, young New Yorkers want to know about wine. They want to enjoy it. They want to know more about it. How would you advise somebody to jumpstart their appreciation of wine, to really raise it to another level where it's like you, like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to spend time around this. This is a worthwhile hobby, as opposed to just like, let's call it the cachet or the panache of being able to know something with wine. What could a person really do, honestly, to jumpstart their appreciation of wine? What would you recommend?
So I would recommend reading. So there's a lot of amazing websites. Wine Folly is one of them. There's another book called The Wine Bible. It is great. The way she writes it makes me laugh because she like adds humor when you're reading something really dry. And then Wine Folly is just a bunch of fun pictures infographics, and their website is free. And another way I would say is to ask questions and not be afraid to find a wine shop that actually knows what they're doing and start asking people to recommend stuff and ask them information about the wines.
So what's the best question in your shop when people come in? Like what's like a really good question? Okay, people, hey, take notes out there. You should be curious about wine.
Yeah.
I would venture to say, obviously, because it's something you get to engage with and it's beautiful, but it's something where you can really feed that curiosity, and that curiosity will lead to discovery of a really, I should say, ancient and amazing craft and artistry that you couldn't have more fun and more enjoyment experiencing, right? So like, what's a good question? Someone comes in, that's a question that I want to hear, and what's a bad question.
So a good question is to have curiosity. So having a conversation with someone and willing to answer the questions. A lot of times people are afraid to ask for sounding incorrect or stupid or being made fun of, because there's like this veil of like mysticism around the industry. But I think that the best question you could ask is just to ask. It's a terrible answer. Sometimes people come in and will like wander for like 30 minutes and then decide to ask a question when they were going to anyway.
Right.
And just by having conversations, most of the time we'll know what you want and what you don't want based on the questions we will ask. So it'll more be an ongoing conversation. I've had a couple clients around my age who have come in and they had come back week after week just asking questions. And then we build on a conversation. So I think coming back and willing to have those open conversations, I think is the key. The worst question to ask, I think, right now is
Can I have a can of Bartonura?
partially, but also people are asking a lot about natural wine.
Mm-hmm.
That may be the pet peeve of the industry right now because natural wine doesn't have a definition.
Okay.
Wine is in its essence is a natural agricultural product, and sulfites. People who say they get headaches from sulfites, I think it may just be badly made wine, not necessarily things that like have sulfur in them. That's something I absolutely love about Flatiron wines is that all the wines are tasted before they're purchased, and they all have a story to tell. That's how they do the purchasing. So they have to pass those two tests, and it makes my job a lot easier because I can pull any bottle off the shelf and I know it's going to be delicious. But yeah, don't ask for natural wine because everything is a natural wine.
What? By the way, just to know, in COVID, what's wine consumption been like since COVID hit? Is there a obvious increase in alcohol consumption, or no? New York City is New York City, and that's it.
I think a combination of both. I think when the pandemic started, people started hoarding wine, and then when the election was called on Saturday, we got a significant amount of people coming in for champagne or like sparkling wine. So it's on the occasion, I guess.
Do the people coming in asking for champagne know what champagne is?
No. So some people do and some people don't. Right. Champagne is from Champagne. Otherwise, it is sparkling wine. There's a couple people in California that have grandfathered in the term champagne, but I think even they, out of respect for the region, have taken it off of their labels. If you want really good value, look for Cremant, which is made in the same way as champagne, just not in the region of Champagne.
Okay. I'm going to bring Bianca, your friend, over here on the show because we have some questions that we always like to ask our guests. And so Bianca has a question from the field for you, Daniela, of Flatiron Wines of Cornell and the CIA. Hi, Bianca.
Hello. Hi, guys. Hi, Dani. It's good to see you. Okay, Dani, so we had two questions that people wanted to ask you. The first one being, what makes a single wine particularly coveted? Like, what makes wine so sought after?
So the one that I can think of the most are two examples. One is Screaming Eagle from California. A bottle of 1995 sold for a couple $100,000 a couple years ago on the auction market. And that was a combination of the perfect vintage, so a good growing season that falls under certain categories, little rain, a lot of sunshine, whatever. And the winemaker, so a lot of small quantities, so supply and demand, plus availability. So people realized the vintage was great. Too many people already drank the bottle of wine, so there's only a couple bottles in the market, making it stupidly expensive. And the other one, which is consistently very expensive, is Domaine de la Romanée Conti, pronouncing it with a very American accent. French people would have me right now. But it consistently sells for like tens of thousands of dollars because the plot of land was decided by the Benedictine monks that it was the best plot of land in the area for Pinot Noir, which is a hard grape to grow. So they produce a couple cases a year, and it comes off and is a couple $1,000s. It gets allocated to different shops and restaurants, so they don't get more than a couple bottles. And the people who want to buy them, it's almost like the Birkin bag, where like, unless you've been buying them and you know someone who will properly appreciate this wine, it will probably not be sold to you.
Okay, cool. Which has nothing to do, by the way, with like what we usually buy at a wine shop when you're going to someone's house. Because like it's two different markets, right? Like this one is for people that actually know what they're looking for. That's what you're referring to. And then the other one, like the Bartenura.
Having that bottle on their table.
Yeah.
And They better make sure they invite people to dinner.
Yeah.
No wine.
And the other side of the market, which is the bartenuras, which is like, I just tried it, at the JC and thought it was great.
The
right?
rabbi's house. They had
The rabbi's house.
The reason why we serve this is because it's very low alcohol content. So therefore, our kids are safe when you come to our houses.
It works. But the second question that I will ask, because I don't want to take up too much time of the show, but I'm really, really interested in your answers, and hopefully we can continue this conversation after, is what makes one wine store more profitable than another? Is it based on location? Is it based on culture of the country or city? Is it based on, like you said, the times and what's going on? Like, what makes one wine store more, like, have a higher income than another?
So I think management has a lot to do with it. I haven't been working in wine retail for a very long time, so whatever answer I give is based on a short period of experience. I think that allocation, so what I was mentioning before, that you get certain bottles, even the stores get those certain bottles. Not every store gets these wines. So if you have the ability, you bring in that clientele, which then allows you to get other bottles of wine that are also coveted, but not as expensive and more accessible to more people. And that runs across the board for a lot of different wines. So if you get those allocations, you're pretty set. And then management of the wine shop, because you could easily overcharge and get less customers to come in. And customer service. We tend to give away a lot of, not freebies, but a lot of discounts because of mistakes on our end. So if we ever make a mistake, we're always willing to cover it. And I don't know if a lot of wine shops do that.
Great.
Okay.
I'll be there.
The economy of wine.
Wait, so
great.
that.
Yeah, Bianca, thank you for the questions. Great. And
we'll speak, Danny.
Yeah.
Bye. Thanks for Lynn. Thank you.
And Daniela, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, people, everyone in New York City can go visit Flatiron Wines. It's not a plug, it's just a plug for Daniela. You should go and see her and ask the questions and get all the information you need and enjoy it, okay? Thank you for your enthusiasm and sharing that with us, Daniela. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on.
Great. Okay, we'll see you soon, okay? L'chaim. Okay, fabulous. Our next guest is Mayor Herzog from a very famous wine family. That name should ring a bell to most people. And he was a former representative of the Herzog Wine Company and, of course, member of the Herzog family, wine taster and cellar and a harvest supervisor and the overseer of winemaking operations. And he's actually now today working a bit with Maor as well, which is great, heading off to medical school. So one will be the spiritual side of the person, the Maor part, and the second will be then taking care of his physical health as a physician, and then wine is going to be that beautiful thing that's in between. So first of all, hello, Mayor. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So the Herzog name in the Jewish world of wine obviously is very well known, and I believe, like when I did my research, it started in Slovakia, and your great grandfather, whatever line they came, so they obviously were, many of the family did not survive the war, but they did. Some who did survive were able to survive in hiding, somehow get back to their vineyards, and eventually move from Slovakia to the United States. Give us a little bit more of an insight into, I think, if you can drill down on something that's unique about the history of your family, the pride that you carry with you in the world of Herzog wines.
Okay, so our entry level wine label, which is our California Classic Table Wine, retails for about $12 or so. That is called Baron Herzog. The reason why it's called Baron Herzog is because my, I think, 4 times great grandfather, his name is Jacob, was actually commissioned as a baron to the Emperor Franz Joseph in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They supplied wine and spirits to the palace. So I'm the 9th generation in the Herzog winemaking tradition. A lot's changed since the since the inauguration of the wine tradition. Obviously, they were in a very different time and place. They were primarily made, Rhone Valley varietals, which were Gewürztraminers and the like, generally like dry whites. They also did a lot of brandies and Slivovitz, stuff like that. And today we've shifted over to primarily, first of all, we have international varietals, because besides for our actual flagship winery in Oxnard, California, which is an award-winning winery that produces, all the classics and plus unique local blends, and we also have, the Royal Wine Corporation as an umbrella produces and sells wines from all over the world. So, for example, the Bartonura can that you were just holding, so that's something that we distribute. It's one of our companies.
Hey, you're right. Sure is. There you go. They're right there in the back. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So what now? You described for me, your ninth generation. You said ninth generation. That what is this fusion of like this ancient thing called wine and the modernity of today as now a scion of the Herzog family and continuer of the tradition here. Where is that beauty? How do you relate to that?
So that's a great question. Interestingly enough, so I know Danielle was talking about an 1100, winery from the 1100s, but wine predates it. Like wines, as long as wine is as old as civilization itself, right? They talk. I mean, any archaeologists point out that there's been winemaking traditions in ancient Egypt and beyond, but we know in the Torah, right, in Genesis, right, where Noah comes out from the ark after the flood, he plants a vineyard and produces a vintage of wine. So that's our first recorded Torah perspective of winemaking tradition. The process is very simple. Any sugar, right? It's a very natural process. It's scientific, but anything scientific and natural, the same, could dovetail. The sugars get eaten by yeast, which then gets converted to alcohol. So, for example, I once left a can of pineapple juice in my fridge and forgot about it for 3 months, and lo and behold, it had fermented. It wasn't very tasty, but any fruit juice can be fermented. Cherry wine, you can make alcohol from pretty much anything. I mean, see, Prohibition era, you can make potato vodka. Right. You can make alcohol can be produced from any sugar-containing substance. So, as a commercial winery in the 21st century, we use modern winemaking techniques, which include, specific yeast strains. Some of the more, some of the smaller sized wineries used natural yeasts. Let's say, like, Covenant Winery, which is one of the brands to distribute. They're a smaller boutique operation, and they can, play around with natural yeasts. We, as a large-scale commercial operation, use not necessarily artificial, but specific yeast strains that we know produce what we want to use. We use very precise monitoring of whether it's the pH, the whole fermentation process, which I actually was involved in overseeing out in California, is very much a marriage between science and art. We have obviously a bunch of lab techs that are monitoring everything from the nitrogen, the alcohol content, residual sugar. There's a lot of factors that you want to get precisely right as a commercial winery producing in mass scale. But in our more higher end lines, we do have more artistic expression by the winemaker in which produces greater variation as per the vintage.
How much loyalty is there to like the tradition of the wine itself, or like you said, the historiography of the wine, the ancient power of it and place in society? Is that something that's held on to tightly?
So I mean, it depends who you ask. That's a very personal question. I would say that obviously you go to Europe and the traditional French winemakers are very proud of their tradition. Italy, France, all the same. Even Argentinians are very proud of their Malbec. Californians are very proud of their, Cabernets and their Chardonnays. So every region will have a certain pride in what they do. Obviously, American winemaking tradition is a lot younger than European, and there'll be less fidelity to strict traditions. You'll have a lot more innovation happening in, newer wine growing regions such as California or elsewhere.
Why? Okay. Why do you think you're an observant Jew? Like what? And with your knowledge of wine and its history and how it's made, why? How can you speak to the idea of what it's doing, popping in and out of Jewish life, day in and day out, at every age, at every stage of life? Like what? How do you see it from your lens? What's it doing here, everywhere you go in Judaism, at every major event?
Right. So it's interesting to note that during Prohibition, right, there was an exception for sacramental purposes that was very famously used by a lot of speakeasies and underground, bootleggers. But there was a bona fide exemption for sacramental use because even the Prohibition-era government recognized the religious use of wine. So obviously, we know that it's used in Christianity, but wine in Judaism predates that by, a few thousand years. Very simply, we have in the temple times, we have when the people and the community brought offerings, wine was brought along with each and every. So that's a picture of our tasting room over there in Oxnard. Wine was brought with every animal sacrifice, every offering. It's part of the holiday tradition, right? The Talmud states that Ein Simcha Ela B'Basar V'Yayin, that happiness and joy in the holiday must be together with meat and wine. So we know wine is a very unique item in a sense that in Judaic terms, in the halacha, right, we have a separate blessing for wine as opposed to any other juice, right? You squeeze an orange juice, it doesn't get elevated. To make orange juice doesn't get elevated. Whereas wine, you squeeze it, you ferment it, and it is this new product. A lot of that has to do with, this is my grandfather and other people, but if you think about, it's in some ways it's a metaphor for life, right? You take a grape that's nice and beautiful, and you squeeze it, and you put it in a dark pit, and it so to speak, it goes through a lot of trauma, right? But at the end of the day, it can result in something really beautiful that was, way grander than what the little grape. So, when I was out there in California and running the harvest and crushing operations, you look at these grapes from Napa Valley, and they sell for a lot of money, per ton, and you're wondering, like, I taste them as they're coming in, and they are delicious, but you can tell that there's potential more than a regular. Some of our cheaper Cabernets, but you don't really see anything in terms of the value and the beauty of the art that can get created. So, you got to get that thing crushed, and you got to ferment it, and it looks and smells nasty. And then you got to press it, and then you got to age it, and it sits in the dark barrel room, where it's moist and dark for 2 years. And then it takes a long time in persistence and faith from going from like, oh, this is a beautiful grape, let me just crush it and destroy it, and then eventually we can get to this beautiful product. So I think a lot of that sentiment in Judaism is about reflecting this concept of going from potential to actualization, and in overcoming challenges necessary. You know what I mean? If you want to talk about in terms of marriage, the potential and getting somewhere far. Whereas even we talk about death, whereas the Shiva is customary to have wine or whatever, and that's also because in terms of life cycle, we see a certain things that are greater than what is seen to the eye.
Right. So it's an amazing thing. Like you have this experience, and not everyone who buys a bottle of wine obviously is thinking that. But the reason why it exists every place is that it really is it's the paradigm of the experience of life, so to speak, where you have something which is all potential, and then you can break it down, you destroy it. But what comes out is this orchestration, this harmony, this beauty that comes after a very long process, a very gruesome, let's call it, process, and destructive process, and difficult, and if you're the grape, what's coming out of this, right? But that's really what the spiritual journey of life is all about. And in a perfectly created world, it happens to be, it's not like it tastes like a bottle of Welch's grape juice at the end of it. It's actually, wine is something which embodies so many tastes. I mean, any layman who reads the back of a wine bottle and it's this tendons of black currant, and you're like, wow, if you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what it's talking about, but you really believe that it's there, and somehow you're experiencing it. And it really is the epitome of, like you said, of the soul of what that maturity is as you go through life, and you actually get to drink it, and it lightens your being to a very large degree, right? And you can definitely taste it, and you can definitely feel it. What advice would you give people who are looking to grow their expertise of an appreciation of wine?
Right. So to go back to one of the questions you asked before, was that, it's a good question, was a bad question? There's no bad questions. But primarily, what I believe and think is true is, like with anything in life, it's experience. So you want to get out there and taste and enjoy, whether, even if you're not of means, you know what I mean? You can get together with a couple of friends on the weekend or Shabbat or whatever it is, and let's say when I get together with my friends, everybody just brings one bottle, and there you have a wine club, and everybody can get to taste, and you can get to taste, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bottles at one time, and you can expand your repertoire over there. You can go to shows, you can go to restaurants that have great by the glass programs. You can read, obviously, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to, it's really an acquired taste. So you have to acquire that taste, and the more. You can't learn to swim by reading about swimming. You got to get in the pool and swim, and just keep on doing it. So ultimately, it's about getting your palate wet and experimenting and reading and asking, and just if it talks to you, you'll keep on, so to speak, organically growing your knowledge and interest.
Right. I know myself, when I started appreciating wine, I was given great advice, just to write down, you had a wine, what did you like about it? And again, yes, there could be a lot of ego and social status in wine, but the truth is,
right, really absolutely
there.
Right.
There's an opportunity to experience the breadth of taste and the palate, and appreciate the history. It's the amazing thing also, when you travel the world, it's a way to see the world, to understand. And maybe you can speak this a little bit. You travel the world, and there are different regions, okay? And you should know, you can know the grapes of what region, what they're called, and how they're grown. Maybe speak a little bit to that. What is the beauty of the map, so to speak, out there of how terrain, soil, and culture, like the food pairings. What kind of insight can you give us about the region of wine around the world?
Right. So it's interesting to note that you were saying about writing down, things. Like, I've been involved in retail, done it for more than 5, 6 years at least. And that's, like we said, there's no such thing as a bad question. Like, obviously, I try to give up all the time in the world to every customer, and you ask them, what do you like? And it's just got to try to remember. So that is a great tip. However, I will say this, that very often people have this misconception of oh, good wine has to be expensive. It's not the case. You really have to learn what you like. A lot of what makes rare, it's like the example that Danielle gave about, it's a rare monk pot, a lot of it has to do with prestige, whether it's Dom Perignon or everything. Yes, there is a certain level of quality, but it's exactly like, if you want to think about the Birkin bag, is it worth $20,000, whatever it is? Not in my estimation. But so a lot of everything in the luxury goods world is like that. A lot of it has to do with what people will pay for a certain prestige. But there is a lot of phenomenal wine at a very solid budget price. Of course, I always say, the difference between, an entry level $10 bottle of wine, so 30, 40 is very, very noticeable generally. If we're talking about 200 versus 250 or 3, 99% of people won't know. So that's that. In terms of wine growing regions, so it's interesting to note that in the Americas, we have very hardy grapes, but they're not resistant, and they're very resistant to cold and disease and everything, but they're very low sugar content and high in acidity, so they don't produce very good wine. So it's actually interesting to note that the original sugary sweet wines that Jews produced, 100 years ago, came from using local grapes that were not receptive to making decent dry wine, and so they had to sweeten it with sugar. So in fact, when my great grandfather and grandfather, and they came over here, and they was like, what kind of wine are these Jews drinking over here? And then they, so to speak, brought their traditions with them, and so they realized that they have to use other grapes. So the European varietals are a lot more winemaking friendly, as they have higher sugar content and a lot more potential in terms of flavor expression. So those grapes are very climate sensitive. So that's why we've as time went on, people realized, California has good mild winters, a long growing season, a lot of sunshine, and all the things that would be necessary to transplant European vineyards and produce them over here. So we're talking about from, I mean, even in the 50s, my grandfather, they went by train to California to go produce, dry white wine, the first, American dry kosher white wines, and then eventually moved on to reds and whatnot. It's interesting to note that California, for example, is a very similar climate to Israel, and that's why they produce a lot of very similar wines. However,
the final question, because we're running out of time here, but my last question too is really like there has been a real a surge in the quality of Israeli wines recently, and so how does that fit into the world order, so to speak, of wines? What is the land of Israel producing that's rocketing the market over there?
So it's interesting. The tradition for the past 20 years, they were finding a lot of success in selling traditional European style, French style winemaking traditions in the kosher world and beyond. But there's recently been a move to, so to speak, focus on more indigenous grapes. And then recently there was a professor from the Ariel University that cultivated these vineyards based on seeds that were archaeologists discovered that were more than 2,000 years old. It's called Marawi. It's actually in the Talmud. And
wow.
Their names are Jandali and Hamdani.
Very
And
cool.
so there's been a move toward, accentuating the local indigenous grapes, because there's been more than 150 unique genomes of grapes discovered through archaeological work in Israel. So it's definitely something that's a work in progress. And I would assume that you'll see more locally focused wines emerging over the next bunch of years.
That's amazing. That to use technology like that, the more advanced we are technologically, the further back we can go, the purer we can be. With that's an amazing connection to make. It's like the Jurassic Park of a vineyard. Things alive. I'll share just a quick. I'll keep you on the screen with me, Mayor. But personally, in my journey into the world of Judaism, from a non-interested secular Jew out there in the world, wine played a very important part in my journey. I was working in Los Angeles, and I was working in the restaurant business as well. And happened to be that certain restaurant went bankrupt, as many of them do. And those of us that were helping out, I was helping manage the restaurant, and the owner couldn't pay us anymore, but he paid us in wine. Okay, we could just kind of take the wine. So okay, guys, I was happy to be paid in wine, and we just took the wine. Okay, made some deal on the wine, great. And I had this bottle in 1983, Alexander Valley Silver Oak. Okay, which was like a really great bottle of wine. I just was saving it. And so years later on my journey, I realized I'd become. I just decided, like, okay, I'm going to keep kosher. Like, this is it. The reasons why I was all in. Like, I'm going to keep kosher. It's a major decision. And then I was like, oh no, the wine. Right? Like, I decided like a day before that I'm going to start keeping kosher in my life, and I realized my wine collection, it's not kosher. I say, okay, right, scratch that. I'm going to start keeping kosher next week. I'll do it next week. it's not like I'm eating bacon. It was just wine, but whatever. I said, maybe, okay, fine. My decision's not a decision. Scratch that, reverse it. I'm going to go home and have a big dinner party for my friends and drink the wine, and then I'll become kosher. And I had a couple friends over that night, and I opened the bottle of this wine, and I didn't drink it because I made a decision. And I didn't feel like that was really, the right way to go back on that. So I poured it out for my friends, and I smelled it, and I watched them drink the whole bottle, and it was great for them, and a telltale moment for me. So thank you for joining us, Mayor, and thank you for
pleasure.
And you can find Mayor in the Maor world, okay, helping out with Maor now, and of course the Herzog family should be very proud of you and what you do.
Yeah.
And how
if anybody wants to get an intro to kosher wine, head over to herzogwinesellers.com or kosherwine.com. And there's a lot going on. It's very, very exciting out there in the kosher wine world today.
Great. Amazing. Thank you, Mayor, for coming on the show. Great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We had a special night last night in New York City. We opened back up again, and we had people in the room, and we had, COVID friendly, only 25 people came in, and everyone was very respectful and very careful, but it was like amazing. The energy was incredible to be back in business, trying to be careful and do it right, but to have great people in the room. And we had a beautiful evening of learning and study and food, great individually wrapped, Mexicosher dinner. It was awesome. And it was great to be back. And we're there every Tuesday night at 7:00. So there's limited spaces. Okay. So sign up on the website and come and join us and be in person. It was like, everyone was like, it was better than therapy. Okay. That's what everyone said. Cathartic, therapeutic, and great to see everyone there. And I'm sure underneath all the masks, there were really great smiles. That's okay. So emojis, we had to use emojis, but okay. But anyway, thank you for joining us tonight. I hope it was informative and you learned something, and I'm wishing you l'chaim. I guess this is not as bad as I thought it would be. Okay. Wishing everyone l'chaim and to enjoy, and make sure you buy a really nice bottle of wine this week. Okay. And ask some good questions about it. Thank you very much for joining. We'll see you next week.
Here we go now.